Clara Thornton's knees hit the frozen dirt as Thomas Callahan's words cut deeper than the Wyoming wind. "You lied to me. You're Barren. This marriage is over." She didn't fight. She didn't beg. She simply knelt there watching 5 small faces pressed against the frosty window. 5 children who'd called her Mama for 3 precious weeks. Then the smallest voice pierced the silence. "Papa, don't send our Mama away." What happened next would change everything. If you want to see how this broken woman became the heart of this family, subscribe now and comment your city below. Let's see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The train screamed into Bitter Creek Station like a wounded animal. Clara Thornton pressed her palm flat against the frost-coated window, watching Wyoming territory unfold in endless white. Her other hand clutched a Bible with a secret folded inside a doctor's letter that could destroy everything before it began. 26 days of travel, 4 train changes, 1 desperate hope. "Final stop, miss." The conductor's voice made her flinch. "Bitter Creek. Ain't much here 'cept ranchers and trouble." "I'm expected," Clara said, lifting her chin. She didn't mention the advertisement. She didn't mention the letters exchanged with a widower named Thomas Callahan. And she certainly didn't mention why a woman of 29 would travel 2,000 miles to marry a stranger. The truth sat in that Bible like a curse. Scarred beyond function. Will never bear children. Clara had memorized every word. The platform was nearly empty when she stepped down. Wind sliced through her Philadelphia coat like it was made of paper. Her trunk, pathetically light, thudded onto the wooden boards behind her. Then she saw him. Thomas Callahan stood apart from the few souls braving the cold. Tall, broad-shouldered. A sheepskin coat hung open despite the bitter air. When he removed his hat, copper hair caught the weak winter sun, and eyes blue as summer sky studied her with the careful assessment of a man who'd learned not to trust easily. He was handsome. That made everything worse. "Miss Thornton." His voice was deep, steady, not warm. "Mr. Callahan." Clara extended her gloved hand with more courage than she possessed. "I've arrived as promised." He took her hand briefly. A businessman's handshake, not a suitor's greeting. His gaze moved down her modest figure, then back to her face. "Smaller than I expected," he said. Clara's spine stiffened. "I assure you, Mr. Callahan, I'm quite capable of—" "Didn't say otherwise." He was already reaching for her trunk. "Wagons this way. Best get moving. Storm's coming." No pleasantries. No welcoming words. Just the practical business of loading her life onto a worn buckboard while horses stamped and snorted clouds into the frozen air. Thomas offered his hand to help her climb up. The touch was brief, impersonal. Clara settled onto the hard bench and immediately felt cold seeping through every seam of her clothing. Without being asked, Thomas spread a buffalo robe across her lap. The small kindness loosened something tight in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. He only grunted. They rode in silence for nearly a mile before Clara gathered courage. "Your children, are they well?" Something flickered across Thomas's weathered face. Pride, maybe. Or pain. "Well enough. Ruth's been asking every day when you'd arrive. She's 5. Doesn't understand patience yet." "And the others?" "Grace is 11. She's—" He paused, jaw tightening. "She remembers her mother best. Might take time with you." Clara nodded carefully. She understood what he wasn't saying. "Henry's 8. Good boy. Smart. Has trouble with his words, sometimes stutters when he's nervous. Other children ain't kind about it." "Children rarely are." Thomas glanced at her sharply, as if surprised by the understanding in her voice. "The twins are 3, he continued. "Samuel and Sarah. Still don't fully understand their mama's gone." 5 children, Clara said softly. "You've had your hands full." "Widow Hutchins from town been helping. Good woman, but she's got her own family. Can't keep depending on charity." His voice hardened. "These children need a mother. A real one. Someone who'll stay. Clara's stomach twisted. Stay. Such a simple word. Such an impossible promise when the secret in her Bible could send her back east before spring. I intend to stay, Mr. Callahan. Intentions are easy, Miss Thornton. Wyoming winters test more than intentions. The wagon crested a rise and the Callahan Ranch spread before them. A two-story farmhouse stood solid against the White Valley smoke curling from a stone chimney. Outbuildings clustered nearby, a barn painted red, a chicken coop, what looked like a smokehouse. Fenced corrals held horses that raised their heads at the wagon's approach. Beyond it all, mountains rose like silent witnesses. It's beautiful, Clara breathed. It's hard, Thomas corrected. Killed better women than you. Before Clara could respond, the front door burst open. A small figure flew across the snow, a little girl with wild brown curls and a dress too thin for the weather. Arms pumping boots, slipping on ice, voice ringing out like a bell. Papa, Papa, is she here? Did you bring our new mama? Thomas's face transformed. The hard lines softened. A smile the first Clara had seen touched his mouth. That's Ruth, he said. Never could stay inside when she was told. The wagon barely stopped before Ruth reached them, bouncing on her toes, mittened hands clasped together. Are you Miss Clara? Ruth demanded, brown eyes huge with hope. Are you gonna be our mama now? Do you know how to make biscuits? Widow Hutchins makes biscuits, but they're always too flat. Clara's throat tightened dangerously. The hope in this child's face was almost unbearable. Yes, she managed, voice trembling. I'm Miss Clara, and I make very good biscuits. I knew it. Ruth grabbed Clara's hand before she'd even fully climbed down from the wagon. Come inside. You gotta meet everyone. Grace said you probably won't be pretty, but I think you're pretty. Are you gonna stay forever? Ruth. Thomas's voice held gentle warning. Let Miss Clara breathe. But Ruth was already tugging Clara toward the house, chattering about dolls and chickens, and how Papa said they couldn't get a dog, but maybe now that there was a mama they could ask again. At the door, Clara stopped. 3 more children waited inside. Grace stood tall and serious, dark hair braided severely. Her mother's cameo pinned at her throat. Her eyes held the sharp assessment of a child forced to grow up too fast. Behind her, Henry shifted nervously from foot to foot. He had his father's copper hair and intelligent eyes, but his shoulders hunched inward like he was trying to take up less space in the world. And in the corner, sitting on a worn rug, the twins Samuel and Sarah looked up with identical expressions of cautious curiosity. They clutched matching wooden horses. Children, Thomas said, stepping in behind Clara. This is Miss Thornton. She's come a long way to meet you. Silence stretched like pulled taffy. Grace spoke first. She's wearing city clothes. It wasn't a compliment. Grace. Thomas's voice sharpened. Mind your manners. I'm only saying what's true, Papa. Grace's chin lifted. Mama always said city folk don't last out here. Clara felt the weight of judgment settle over her. This child was testing her, and they both knew it. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman, Clara said carefully. She was right, these clothes are foolish for Wyoming. I hope you'll help me learn what's proper. Grace blinked clearly, expecting argument instead of agreement. Maybe, she said after a long pause, if you stay long enough. I intend to stay. Mama intended to stay too. Grace's voice went flat. She's buried on the hill. The words landed like stones. Thomas drew in a sharp breath. Grace, that's enough. It's true, Papa. Grace's composure cracked just slightly, revealing the grief beneath. Everyone leaves. Why should she be different? Before Thomas could respond, Henry stepped forward. His mouth worked silently for a moment before sounds emerged. Welcome, Miss Thornton. Each syllable cost him effort. I hope you like it here. Clara knelt so she was at his eye level. Thank you, Henry. That was a very fine welcome. His face flushed with surprised pleasure. Ruth tugged Clara's sleeve impatiently. Come see my room. I saved the best spot for your hairbrush 'cause I know ladies have special hairbrushes. Ruth. Thomas again. Miss Thornton needs to settle in first. Show her to the guest room. Supper's in 2 hours. The guest room was small, but clean. A single bed with a wedding ring quilt, a pine dresser, a washstand with a china basin. On the windowsill, someone had placed a jar of dried wildflowers, long dead but carefully preserved. That was Mama's, Ruth whispered, suddenly solemn. Grace said we should take it down before you came, but I said maybe you'd want to see what Mama liked. Clara's heart clenched. That was very thoughtful, Ruth. Your Mama had beautiful taste. Ruth beamed. I knew you'd like it. I knew it. She bounced out, leaving Clara alone with her trunk and her secret and the ghost of a woman she was supposed to replace. Clara unpacked slowly. 3 practical dresses, her mother's recipe book, a sewing kit, the Bible. She didn't open it. Instead, she sat on the bed and pressed her hands to her face, breathing slowly until the tightness in her chest eased. This was what she wanted. A family. Children to love. A purpose. It didn't matter that Thomas Callahan looked at her like livestock being assessed. It didn't matter that Grace hated her already. It didn't matter that the secret in her Bible could end everything. She was here. She would make it work. A knock came at the door. Supper's ready. Grace's voice was cold through the wood. Papa says don't be late. He doesn't hold supper for anyone. Clara smoothed her dress-pinched color into her pale cheeks and opened the door. Grace had already vanished down the hallway. The kitchen was warm with the smell of stew and fresh bread. Widow Hutchins, a sturdy woman with kind eyes and flour on her apron, bustled between the stove and the table. You must be the bride, she said, sizing Clara up with a single glance. Younger than I expected. Thinner, too. Wyoming'll either put meat on your bones or break you in half. I prefer the first option, Clara said. Widow Hutchins laughed a surprised bark. Some spine in her, Thomas. That's good. She'll need it. Thomas sat at the head of the table, already eating. He didn't look up. Sit, he said. Food's getting cold. Clara took the empty chair beside Ruth, who immediately scooted closer. Miss Clara's going to teach me to make biscuits, Ruth announced to the table. She said so. I don't recall, Clara began. You said you make good ones. That means you'll teach me. That's how it works. Grace snorted. That's not how it works, Ruth. Is to children. Thomas's voice cut through the rising argument. Eat. Silence fell, broken only by the scrape of spoons and the crackle of the fire. Clara watched the family dynamics unfold. Grace ate mechanically, spine-rigid eyes fixed on her plate. Henry hunched over his bowl, eating quickly like someone might take it away. The twins made a mess, more food on their faces than in their mouths. But nobody seemed bothered. Ruth chattered between bites until Thomas quieted her with a look. You'll start with the children's lessons tomorrow, Thomas said suddenly, addressing Clara without quite looking at her. Grace and Henry are behind. Nearest school is 7 miles and roads are impassable half the year. I taught literature and arithmetic in Philadelphia, Clara said. I'm comfortable with all subjects. Good. Thomas mopped his bowl with bread. Widow Hutchins has been managing the household, but she has her own place to tend. You'll take over cooking and cleaning. Of course. Ranch work is men's work. You'll stay out of the barn and corrals. If that's what you prefer. It is. He pushed back from the table. I'll be in the barn. Children mind, Miss Thornton. He was out the door before Clara could respond. Widow Hutchins caught her eye and shrugged. He's not much for talk. Never has been. Good man, though. Fair. Just closed off since Mary passed. How long ago? 18 months. Widow Hutchins lowered her voice as the children scattered to their evening tasks. Childbirth. Twins were early. Mary tried to hold on, but... The twins, Clara breathed. They killed their mother. Don't ever say that around them. The widow's voice sharpened. They're innocent babies. Mary wanted them, fought for them, died for them. Her expression softened. Thomas blames himself, not them. Said he should have made her rest more. Should have fetched the doctor sooner. Should have. She shook her head. Guilt's a heavy thing for a man to carry. That night, after the children were in bed and Widow Hutchins had returned to her own home, Clara sat alone in the kitchen studying the doctor's letter by candlelight. The words hadn't changed. Scarring consistent with infection or difficult childbirth. Uterine damage irreparable. Patient will never conceive. The doctor in Philadelphia had been kind. He hadn't asked how a respectable unmarried woman had scarring from childbirth. He hadn't asked about the baby she'd lost at 19, born in shame in a home for fallen women dead after 3 days. He'd simply written the letter and charged her $1. Now that letter sat between Clara and everything she wanted. Thomas Callahan had advertised for a wife who could give him more children. Sons to work the land. Daughters to help in the house. A legacy. Clara couldn't give him that. She had planned to tell him before the wedding. Had rehearsed the words 100 times on the train. But then Ruth had grabbed her hand. And Henry had welcomed her despite his stutter. And even Grace's hostility had felt like something Clara might eventually overcome. 3 weeks, Thomas had said in his letters. 3 weeks to see if we suit before the Reverend comes. 3 weeks to prove herself. 3 weeks to make herself so indispensable that the truth might not matter. Clara folded the letter and slipped it back into her Bible. Tomorrow she would begin. The first week passed in a blur of flour and frustration. Ruth was her shadow constant, chattering, demanding. The little girl wanted to help with everything and had the attention span of a humming fly. "You're stirring too slow," Ruth announced during Clara's first bread attempt. Mama stirred faster. "Perhaps I'm savoring the process." "What's savoring?" "Enjoying something slowly." Ruth considered this. "That's boring. Can we make cookies instead?" The bread came out dense and heavy. Grace said nothing, but her single raised eyebrow conveyed more criticism than words ever could. The second attempt was worse. "It's fine," Thomas said at supper, sawing through a slice like it had personally offended him. "It's terrible," Clara admitted. His head came up, surprise flickering across his features. "You're not supposed to agree." "I'm not going to lie about failed bread, Mr. Callahan. I'll do better tomorrow." Something that might have been respect crossed his face. Or maybe it was just relief that she wasn't crying. Henry was easier than the others, hungry for knowledge in a way that made Clara's teacher's heart sing. He devoured books, worked mathematical problems with quiet intensity, and only stuttered when Grace was watching. You don't make fun of it," he said one afternoon when they were alone with arithmetic. "Make fun of what?" My talking." His cheeks reddened. "Other people do." "Other people are fools." Clara touched his shoulder gently. "You have important things to say, Henry. The words might take longer to come out, but that doesn't make them less valuable." His eyes glistened. He looked away quickly, but Clara saw him stand a little straighter for the rest of the day. Grace remained a fortress. She did her lessons without complaint, but without engagement. She answered questions with the minimum words possible. She watched Clara constantly waiting for failure, cataloging mistakes. "You hung the laundry wrong," she announced on day 4. "Mama always started with the sheets." "Is there a reason for that order?" "It's how Mama did it." Clara took a breath. "I appreciate you telling me. I'll try your mother's way." Grace looked almost disappointed that Clara hadn't argued. "You're not like I expected," Grace said finally. "What did you expect? Someone pretty and useless, someone who'd cry when things got hard." Grace's dark eyes studied Clara with unsettling intensity. "Papa's had 4 responses to his advertisement before you. 2 of them left before supper. 1 lasted 3 days. 1 lasted almost a month before she ran off with a minor from town." "I don't intend to run off with anyone." They all said that too. "Then I suppose I'll have to prove it." Grace's mouth twisted, not quite a smile, but close. Suppose you will. The breakthrough came on day 8. Clara woke to screaming. She flew out of bed, nightgown whipping around her legs, and followed the sound to the twins' room. Ruth stood in the doorway, face white with terror. Inside, Sarah was sitting up in bed, shrieking at full volume, eyes open but seeing nothing. Night terrors. Clara recognized them instantly. "What's wrong with her?" Ruth whimpered. "Is she dying?" "She's dreaming." Clara knelt beside Sarah's bed, careful not to touch her. "It seems real to her, but she's still asleep." "Make it stop. We can't wake her. It might make it worse. We have to wait." Thomas appeared in the doorway, suspenders hanging, shirt half buttoned. "What happened?" "Night terror," Clara said calmly. "She needs quiet and calm. Everyone needs to step back." "I should hold her." "No, she doesn't know what's real right now. If you grab her, she'll fight. She might hurt herself." Clara kept her voice low and steady. "I've seen this before, with other children. It passes." Thomas hesitated, every instinct clearly screaming at him to act, but he stepped back, drawing Ruth with him. 5 agonizing minutes later, Sarah's screams faded to whimpers. Her eyes focused. She looked around, confused and exhausted. "Papa!" Thomas was at her side in 2 strides, scooping her up, cradling her against his chest. "I'm here, baby girl. Papa's here." "I had a bad dream." "I know. It's over now." Samuel woke through it all, watching with solemn eyes. Clara lifted him gently and settled him in her lap, smoothing his hair, while Thomas comforted Sarah. "This happened often?" Clara asked quietly. "Started after Mary died. Comes and goes." Thomas's voice was rough. "Doctors in town don't know what to do. Say she'll outgrow it." "Maybe. But in the meantime, we can make it less frightening for everyone. There are ways to help calm routines before bed, a special song, something she can hold that feels safe." Thomas looked at her over Sarah's head. For the first time, his eyes held something other than assessment. "You know about this." "I know about many things, Mr. Callahan. That's why I'm here." He nodded slowly. "Thomas." "I'm sorry." "You can call me Thomas. Mister seems foolish when you're standing in my children's room in your nightclothes." Clara felt heat rush to her cheeks. She'd forgotten her state of undress. "Then you must call me Clara." "Clara." He tested the name. "Get some sleep. Morning comes early." He carried Sarah out, and the twins' room fell quiet. Ruth tugged Clara's hand. "Are you going back to bed?" "Yes, you should too." "Can I sleep with you?" Ruth's voice wavered. "Sarah's screaming scared me." Clara hesitated. It wasn't proper. Nothing about this arrangement was proper. "Just for tonight," she said. Ruth's smile was worth every rule broken. They settled into Clara's narrow bed, Ruth curled against her side like a kitten. Within minutes, the child was asleep, small fingers clutching Clara's nightgown. Clara lay awake much longer, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what she was building here and the secret that could tear it all down. 3 weeks to prove herself. She had 1 week left. The second week began with fire. Clara smelled smoke before she opened her eyes. She threw off the covers and ran, bare feet slapping against cold floorboards, heart slamming against her ribs. The kitchen was filled with black clouds. Ruth stood frozen by the stove, a burning dish rag clutched in her small hands, flames licking toward her sleeve. "Drop it!" Clara screamed. Ruth didn't move. Shock had turned her to stone. Clara crossed the room in 3 strides, ripped the rag from Ruth's fingers, and plunged it into the water bucket. The flames died with an angry hiss. She spun back to Ruth, grabbing the child's hands, checking for burns. "Are you hurt? Ruth, look at me. Are you hurt?" Ruth's lip trembled. Then she burst into tears. "I wanted to make breakfast," she sobbed. "I wanted to surprise you, and now everything's ruined, and you're gonna leave like the others." Clara pulled her close, not caring about the soot or the tears soaking through her nightgown. "I'm not leaving. Do you hear me? I'm not leaving. Promise. I promise. Thomas appeared in the doorway, Henry and Grace behind him. His face went white when he saw the smoke, then the bucket, then Clara, holding his sobbing daughter. What happened? Small accident. Clara kept her voice calm. No one's hurt, just a dish rag that got too close to the flame. Thomas's jaw tightened. He looked at Ruth. You know you're not supposed to touch the stove alone. Ruth cried harder. Thomas! Clara met his eyes over Ruth's head. She knows. She was trying to help. Perhaps we can discuss stove safety later when everyone's had breakfast. For a moment she thought he'd argue. Then he nodded once and turned away. Grace, get the twins dressed. Henry, fetch more water. We'll air out the kitchen. Clara stayed with Ruth until the tears stopped washing her face with cool water, checking her hands again for any sign of burns. I really was trying to help, Ruth whispered. I know, sweetheart. Next time wake me first and we'll cook together. That way I can teach you properly. Ruth's face brightened. You'll teach me really? Really? Even after I almost burned down the kitchen? Clara laughed despite herself. Even after. Breakfast was quiet. The twins ate their porridge with serious concentration. Henry kept glancing at Clara like he expected her to disappear. Grace watched her father reading something in his face that Clara couldn't decipher. After the meal, Thomas lingered while the children scattered to their morning tasks. You handled that well, he said. Most women would have panicked. Panic doesn't put out fires. No. He studied her with those blue eyes that saw too much. It doesn't. He left without another word, but Clara felt something shift between them. Small, almost imperceptible. But there. The second twist came 3 days later. Clara was hanging laundry sheets first the way Mary had done when hoofbeats thundered into the yard. She turned to see 3 riders approaching fast. Thomas emerged from the barn rifle, already in his hands. Get inside, he called to Clara. Take the children upstairs. What's happening? Just do it. Clara gathered the children quickly, herding them toward the stairs. But Grace broke away, running to the window. It's Silas Garrett, she said, and her voice held fear. Papa, it's Garrett. Thomas's face hardened into something Clara hadn't seen before. Cold. Dangerous. Upstairs. Now. All of you. Thomas, who is Clara? His voice cracked like a whip. Please. She took the children upstairs, but she didn't hide. She positioned herself at the top of the stairs where she could hear everything. The front door opened. Boots on the porch. Callahan, a smooth voice cultured with an edge of mockery. Been a while. Not long enough. State your business and leave. Such hostility. Garrett's laugh was soft and unpleasant. I come bearing news. The territorial judge has reviewed my claim to the water rights. Seems there's some question about the boundaries your father established. Those boundaries have stood for 30 years. Paper boundaries, Callahan. Easily redrawn. Silence stretched tight as wire. Get off my land, Garrett. Your land. Another laugh. For now. But winters are long out here. Accidents happen. Houses burn. Children wander off. A pause. You've got 5 little ones now, don't you? And I hear you've imported a new bride. From Philadelphia, is it? City women are so fragile. Clara heard Thomas move, heard the sharp intake of breath from one of Garrett's men. Touch my family, Thomas said, and his voice was ice over fire. And I'll kill you slow enough to hear you beg. Threats. Callahan in front of witnesses. Garrett's voice held triumph. That's exactly what I needed. See you in court. Hoofbeats retreated. The door slammed. Clara came down the stairs to find Thomas standing, rigid hands shaking, rifle still clutched like a lifeline. Who is he? She asked quietly. Thomas didn't answer immediately. He set the rifle down carefully, as if afraid of what he might do if he kept holding it. Silas Garrett. His father ran guns to the Confederacy during the war. I testified against him. He hanged. And the son inherited everything except the hanging. Been buying up land around here for 2 years, trying to control all the water rights in the valley. Thomas finally looked at her. He wants to ruin me, slowly, the way his father was ruined. What happens if he gets the water rights? We lose the ranch. Without water, the horses die. The crops fail. We have nothing. Clara absorbed this. A new enemy. A new threat. Something far more dangerous than her secret. What can I do? Thomas's eyes widened slightly. You'd stay, even knowing what he might do. I told Ruth I wouldn't leave. I meant it. He stared at her for a long moment. Then something in his shoulders eased just slightly. Help me find the original survey documents. My father's papers are in the attic. If the boundaries are recorded properly, Garrett's claim falls apart. They searched until midnight, going through boxes and crates that hadn't been opened in decades. Clara's fingers grew black with dust. Her back ached from bending over yellowed papers. But she kept searching. At some point, Grace appeared with coffee and biscuits. She set them down without a word, then hesitated. Is Garrett going to take our home? No, Thomas said firmly. Not while I'm breathing. Grace nodded, but her eyes found Clara's. Something passed between them, an understanding, a shared purpose. I'll help look, Grace said. I know Grandpa's handwriting. They searched together until Grace's eyes drooped and Thomas sent her to bed. Clara kept going, fighting exhaustion driven by something she couldn't name. At 2 a.m, she found it. Thomas. He was half asleep in a chair, jerking awake at her voice. What? Clara held up a leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. Your father's survey notes, from 1849. Every boundary marker, every water source, every legal claim. She flipped to a specific page. And here, a letter from the territorial governor confirming the land grant, signed and sealed. Thomas took the journal like it was made of gold. His hands trembled as he read. This is it, he breathed. This proves everything. Garrett's claim won't hold. No. He looked up at her and his eyes were bright with something she'd never seen before. Clara, you just saved my children's future. The words hung between them. His children's future, not hers. Because she still hadn't told him the truth. The third week began with a lie. Not a new lie, the old one growing heavier every day. Clara watched Thomas interact with his children and saw what she hadn't let herself see before. He wanted more children. He never said it directly, but she saw how he looked at Sarah and Samuel, the twins born at the cost of their mother's life. She heard him tell Henry about brothers he'd have someday to help with the ranch. She noticed how he counted heads at every meal, every bedtime, as if making sure his family was still intact and still growing. Papa says when you're properly married we might get more brothers and sisters, Ruth announced one afternoon, completely guileless. I want a sister. Boys are smelly. Clara's stomach dropped. Did your father say that? He told Widow Hutchins. I wasn't supposed to hear. Of course he did. Of course he wanted more children. That was why men sent for mail-order brides, not for companionship, not for help with existing children, but for the promise of legacy. Sons to carry the name. Daughters to marry well. And Clara couldn't give him any of it. That night, she took out the doctor's letter and read it again. The words hadn't changed. They never would. She should tell him. Every day she waited made the lie worse. Every day the children grew more attached, the betrayal grew deeper. But every day she found another reason to wait. Henry was finally reading aloud without stuttering. Grace had asked Clara to help her with her hair. The twins had started calling her Mama Clara, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And Thomas? Thomas had started looking at her differently, not with assessment anymore, not with the careful distance of a business arrangement. Something warmer lived in his eyes now, something that made Clara's heart race and her guilt burn hotter. She was falling in love with him. That was the cruelest part. The confrontation came faster than she expected. Clara was teaching Henry arithmetic when Widow Hutchins arrived, face flushed, bonnet askew. "Where's Thomas?" "In the barn." "What's wrong?" "Silas Garrett's been talking in town." The widow's voice dropped. "Asking questions. About you." Clara's blood turned to ice. "What kind of questions? Where you came from? Why you left Philadelphia? Whether anyone's checked your references?" Widow Hutchins grabbed Clara's arm. "He's got a man headed east on today's stage. Says he's going to find out everything about Thomas Callahan's mysterious bride." Clara couldn't breathe. "How long until the man reaches Philadelphia?" 2 weeks, maybe 3 with winter delays." The widow's eyes were sharp with knowing. "Clara, is there something you need to tell Thomas before Garrett tells him for you?" Clara's silence was answer enough. "Lord have mercy." Widow Hutchins sat down heavily. "Does Thomas know anything?" "No." "And the children?" "No." "Girl." The widow's voice was tired and sad. "You've built a house on sand." Clara knew. God help her, she knew. That night she waited until the children were asleep, until the house was quiet, until she couldn't put it off anymore. She found Thomas in the kitchen, going over the survey documents again, preparing for the legal battle with Garrett. "Thomas." He looked up, and his smile, his actual smile, rare and precious, cut her to the bone. "Clara, come sit. I want to show you something." "I need to tell you something first." The smile faded. He set down his papers. "What's wrong?" Clara sat across from him, hands folded tight to stop their shaking. "I haven't been honest with you." Silence. Thomas went very still. "About what?" "About why I answered your advertisement. About why I came to Wyoming." Clara forced herself to meet his eyes. "About what I can give you." "Clara?" "Let me finish, please. If I don't say it now, I never will." He nodded slowly. Clara took a breath that felt like broken glass. "When I was 19, I fell in love with a medical student in Philadelphia. He promised to marry me. She closed her eyes. "I was young. I believed him. I gave him everything." Thomas's face was unreadable. "I became pregnant." Now he moved a sharp intake of breath, hands gripping the table edge. "He left. Disappeared overnight. I had nowhere to go, so I went to a home for—" Clara's voice cracked. "For fallen women. I had the baby there, a boy." Clara. "He lived 3 days." The tears came now unstoppable. 3 days, and then he was gone. And the doctors said the infection afterward, they said I would never— She couldn't finish. She didn't need to. Thomas sat frozen, staring at her like she'd transformed into a stranger. Maybe she had. "You're barren." The word hit like a fist. "Yes." "You knew. Before you came." "Yes." "And you didn't tell me." "I was afraid." Clara wiped her face with shaking hands. "I thought if you knew you wouldn't let me come. And then I got here and Ruth grabbed my hand, and Henry welcomed me, and the twins." Her voice broke again. "I thought maybe it wouldn't matter. I thought maybe I could be enough without giving me more children." Thomas's voice was flat, empty. "Without giving me what I asked for in my advertisement. I know what you asked for. I know I lied. I know. Do you know what I've been thinking?" Thomas stood abruptly, chair scraping back. "These past 2 weeks, do you know what I've let myself hope?" Clara shook her head, not trusting her voice. "I've been thinking about building another room onto the house, for a nursery." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've been thinking about how my children look at you, and how maybe this time I found someone who'd stay. Someone who'd help me build the family I lost when Mary died." "Thomas, I can still—" "What?" He spun to face her. "What can you still do, Clara? Love my children. You've done that already. I've seen it. But love doesn't plant crops. Love doesn't work the land. Love doesn't give me sons to carry on when I'm gone. The words hit one after another, each one true, each one devastating. That's all I am to you, Clara whispered. A way to get more children. That's all you were supposed to be. His voice cracked. That's all I was looking for. And then you came, and you were more. And I started wanting more. And now... He stopped, turned away. His shoulders shook with something that might have been rage, or might have been grief. Now I don't know what to do. Clara stood slowly. Her legs felt like water. I'll leave. First stage out after the snow clears. And go back to Philadelphia, back to being a fallen woman in a city that knows your shame. Somewhere, anywhere. I won't stay where I'm not wanted. Thomas whirled. Who said you weren't wanted? The question hung in the air like smoke. You, Clara said. Just now. I said I didn't know what to do. That's not the same thing. It feels the same. They stood there, feet apart, a chasm between them. Clara could see him fighting something, pride maybe, or fear, or the same impossible hope that kept her awake at night. A floorboard creaked. They both turned. Grace stood in the doorway, still in her nightgown, face pale as milk. I heard everything, she said. Clara's heart stopped. Grace? Thomas started. Is it true? Grace looked at Clara with eyes too old for 11 years. You can't have babies? Clara couldn't lie. Not again. Not to this child who'd been lied to enough by life. Yes, it's true. Grace was silent for a long moment. Then she walked across the kitchen past her father, past the table, past the documents, and cold coffee, and stopped directly in front of Clara. Mama couldn't have babies either, not after the twins. Clara blinked. What? The doctor told her. After Samuel and Sarah were born. He said another pregnancy would kill her. Grace's voice was steady, but tears streamed down her face. She cried for days, because she knew how much Papa wanted more sons. Thomas made a sound like he'd been punched. She thought she wasn't enough, Grace continued. She thought Papa would stop loving her, but he didn't. He didn't, and she was happy again, and then she died anyway because... Grace's composure finally shattered. She fell against Clara, sobbing, clutching her nightgown with desperate fingers. Don't leave. Please don't leave. I don't want another mama to die. I don't want another mama to leave. Clara held her tight, looking over Grace's head at Thomas. He stood frozen, face ravaged with emotions she couldn't name. Please, Grace sobbed. Please, Papa, let her stay. Thomas crossed the kitchen in 3 strides. For one terrible moment, Clara thought he was going to tear Grace away from her. Instead, he pulled them both into his arms. I'm not sending her away, he said roughly. I'm not. I need time. I need to think. Grace cried harder. Clara couldn't breathe. Thomas's arms tightened around them both. But I'm not sending her away. The words broke something loose in Clara's chest. Not forgiveness, it was too soon for that. But something like hope. Fragile, uncertain. But there. Thomas didn't speak to Clara for 3 days. He came to meals. He sat at his place. He ate what she cooked. But his eyes never met hers, and his words were only for the children. Clara understood. She gave him space, kept her head down, focused on the children and the house and the endless work that Wyoming demanded. But every silent meal felt like a knife turning slowly in her chest. The children noticed. Papa's mad at you, Ruth announced on the second morning with the brutal honesty only a 5-year-old could deliver. He's not mad, he's thinking. About what? Clara hesitated. Grown-up things. Is it about the baby thing? Clara's spoon clattered against her bowl. What? Grace told Henry and Henry told me. Ruth's eyes were wide and serious. She said you can't make babies in your tummy. Is that why Papa's sad? Clara's throat closed. She looked across the table at Grace, who had gone pale. I didn't mean for Ruth to hear, Grace whispered. I only told Henry because... It's all right. Clara forced the words out past the tightness in her chest. Ruth, yes. That's why Papa is sad. He wanted more children, and I can't give them to him. Ruth considered this with the gravity of a judge. But you already gave him us. What? You gave him us. Ruth pointed around the table. Me and Grace and Henry and the twins? We're your children now, aren't we? Isn't that enough babies? Clara couldn't answer. The tears came too fast. Ruth scrambled off her chair and wrapped her small arms around Clara's neck. Don't cry, Mama Clara. We'll be enough. I promise we'll be enough. The kitchen door opened. Thomas stood in the doorway, snow melting on his shoulders, face unreadable. His eyes moved from Clara's tears to Ruth's fierce embrace to Grace's guilty expression. What's going on? Ruth was just explaining something important. Clara wiped her face quickly. Would you like coffee? It's fresh. Thomas didn't answer. He crossed to the table, lifted Ruth gently, and set her back in her chair. Finish your breakfast, he said. All of you. I need to speak with Miss Clara alone. Miss Clara. Not just Clara. The formality stung worse than silence. They walked to the front porch. The cold hit Clara like a wall, but she didn't complain. Thomas stood with his back to her, staring out at the snow-covered land. I've been thinking, he said finally. I know. I'm not a man who forgives easy. Never have been. Clara said nothing. There was nothing to say. When Mary died, I swore I'd never let myself need anyone again. Need is weakness. Weakness gets people killed. He turned to face her. But these past weeks watching you with my children, I started needing again. And I hate it. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry for making me feel something. Be sorry for lying about who you are. I am sorry. Every day I'm sorry. Thomas studied her face like he was looking for something specific. Truth, maybe, or the lie beneath it. Garrett's man left for Philadelphia a week ago, he said. Whatever secrets you're still keeping, they'll be public knowledge by month's end. Clara's stomach dropped. There's nothing else. You're certain, because if I find out you've lied again... There's nothing else, Thomas. The baby, the illness afterward, that's everything. She met his eyes steadily. I was 19 and stupid and in love with a man who didn't deserve it. I paid for that mistake with everything I had. My reputation, my family's respect, my ability to have children. Her voice cracked. I've already lost everything once. I won't survive losing it again. Something shifted in Thomas's expression. The hardness cracked just slightly. My father used to say a person's past doesn't define them, only what they do next. He paused. I didn't believe him, thought it was soft talk for weak people. Another pause. Maybe I was wrong. Clara held her breath. I'm not saying I forgive you, not yet. Trust has to be rebuilt, and that takes time. Thomas stepped closer. But I'm saying I want to try, if you're willing to stay and face whatever Garrett digs up. I'm willing. Even if the whole territory knows your shame. Even then. Thomas nodded slowly. Then we face it together. He went back inside. Clara stayed on the porch, shaking with cold and relief, watching her breath make clouds in the frozen air. Together. It wasn't love. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a start. The trouble with Garrett came faster than anyone expected. 4 days later, Clara was teaching the children geography when hoofbeats pounded into the yard. Not the slow approach of a neighbor, the urgent gallop of crisis. Thomas burst through the front door. Fire at the Hendersons. I'm riding to help. Keep the children inside. He was gone before Clara could respond. The Henderson ranch was 3 miles east, close enough that Clara could see the black smoke rising against the gray sky. Close enough that if the wind shifted... Is their house burning? Henry pressed his face to the window. It looks that way. Will Papa be okay? Ruth's voice trembled. Your father knows what he's doing. He'll be careful. But Clara's heart raced as she watched the smoke grow thicker. House fires in winter were death sentences. No water access. Everything frozen. Families died in their beds while neighbors watched helplessly. Grace appeared at her elbow. The Hendersons have 3 children. Tommy's my age. I know. If the wind shifts, the fire could reach us. I know that too. Grace looked at her with steady eyes. What do we do? Clara made a decision. We prepare. Henry, fill every bucket you can find with snow. Pack it tight. Grace, gather blankets and coats for everyone. Ruth, I need you to keep the twins calm. Can you do that? Ruth nodded solemnly. They worked for an hour, preparing for a disaster that might never come. Clara kept one eye on the smoke, watching the wind, praying it held steady. It didn't. At midday, the smoke began drifting west. Toward them. Everyone get dressed. We may need to leave quickly. Clara kept her voice calm, but her hands shook as she helped the twins into their coats. Leave and go where... Grace's composure finally cracked. There's nowhere to go. The creek bed. It's below ground level. Fire can't reach us there. It's freezing. The twins will die of cold. They'll die faster in a fire. Clara grabbed Grace's shoulders. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Grace stared at her for a long moment. Then she nodded. They waited. The smoke grew closer. Ash began falling like gray snow. Then the wind shifted again. Back east, away from them. Clara's knees buckled with relief. Thank God, she whispered. Thank God. Thomas returned at dusk, covered in soot, exhausted beyond words. He found Clara and the children huddled by the fire, still dressed in their coats, buckets of snowmelt lined against the walls. You prepared for evacuation. We prepared for anything. Thomas looked around at his children, safe, warm, unharmed. Then he looked at Clara. Henderson lost his barn and his stable. 8 horses dead. His voice was rough. But his family survived. His house held. I'm glad. He wanted me to thank you. Clara blinked. Me, I wasn't there. No, but you sent supplies 3 weeks ago. Remember, fabric scraps for his wife's quilting. Thomas almost smiled. Those scraps were wet when the fire started. Mrs. Henderson used them to beat back the flames from the kitchen door, gave them enough time to escape. Clara remembered. A small kindness. Leftover fabric she'd thought no one would miss. I didn't do anything. You did everything. Thomas crossed the room and did something he'd never done before. He took her hand. Mrs. Henderson wants to meet you properly, when the weather clears. Clara stared at their joined hands. His fingers were rough, calloused, warm despite the cold. I'd like that, she whispered. The 4th week brought the hearing. They rode to town in the wagon, all 7 of them packed tight against the cold. The children wore their best clothes. Clara had spent 2 days pressing and mending, making sure they looked like a family worth defending. The courthouse was packed. Every rancher in the territory had come to see Thomas Callahan face down Silas Garrett. The water rights case would set precedent for years to come. Clara spotted Garrett immediately. He sat in the front row, immaculate, in a black suit, watching the proceedings with the satisfied expression of a cat who'd cornered a mouse. All rise. The judge was a stern-faced man named Whitmore. He shuffled papers, adjusted his spectacles, and surveyed the room with obvious distaste. This is a hearing regarding water rights to Bitter Creek and its tributaries. Mr. Garrett, you've filed a claim asserting that the Callahan Ranch boundaries are incorrectly recorded. Present your evidence. Garrett stood smoothly. Your Honor, I have documentation suggesting that the original survey was conducted improperly. The creek bed has shifted significantly since 1849, and the current boundaries no longer reflect. I have the original survey documents. Thomas's voice cut through Garrett's smooth presentation. He stood holding the leather journal Clara had found. These are my father's personal records, verified by the territorial governor's signature. The boundaries are clearly marked and legally binding. Garrett's smile didn't waver. Documents can be forged, Your Honor. So can accusations. The judge held up his hand. Gentlemen, this is a legal proceeding, not a saloon brawl. Mr. Callahan, present your documents. Thomas handed over the journal. The judge examined each page carefully, comparing signatures, studying maps. These appear authentic, Whitmore said finally. Mr. Garrett, do you have evidence of forgery? Garrett's smile tightened. Not at this time, Your Honor. However, I'd like to redirect the court's attention to a related matter. The character of the Callahan household. Clara's blood went cold. Objection. Thomas stepped forward. This hearing is about water rights, not character. The character of landowners is directly relevant to their fitness to hold territorial claims. Garrett's eyes found Clara in the crowd. I have evidence that Mr. Callahan's companion is not what she claims to be. The room erupted in whispers. Order. Judge Whitmore banged his gavel. Mr. Garrett, explain yourself. Garrett pulled a telegram from his pocket. My investigator in Philadelphia has confirmed that Clara Thornton was dismissed from her teaching position 3 years ago. The reason she bore an illegitimate child at 19 and attempted to hide her shameful past. Clara couldn't breathe. The whispers became roars. Every eye in the room turned to her. Your Honor, Garrett continued, would you trust a man's land claim when he harbors a fallen woman under his roof? When he exposes his 5 motherless children to such moral corruption? Thomas moved before Clara could stop him. He crossed the courtroom in 4 strides and grabbed Garrett by his expensive lapels. You son of a... Thomas, no! Clara's scream cut through the chaos. Thomas froze, fist pulled back Garrett's smug face, inches from his knuckles. He wants you to hit him, Clara said, pushing through the crowd. He wants you to assault him in front of the judge. Then he wins everything. Thomas's arm shook with restrained violence, but he didn't swing. She's right, Callahan. Garrett's voice was soft, meant only for them. Go ahead. Give me the excuse I need. Thomas released him with a shove that sent Garrett stumbling against the railing. This hearing is about water rights, Thomas said, voice deadly calm. Not my household. Not Miss Thornton's past. You want to drag her name through the mud? Fine, do it somewhere else. But you won't steal my land while you're at it. The judge banged his gavel again. Mr. Garrett, unless you have evidence directly related to the water rights claim, I'm going to rule in Mr. Callahan's favor. Garrett straightened his coat. His mask slipped just slightly, revealing the hatred beneath. Very well, Your Honor. I withdraw my objection. Then this matter is settled. The Callahan Ranch boundaries stand as originally recorded. Case dismissed. They won. But as Clara watched Garrett gather his papers, she knew it wasn't over. His eyes met hers across the courtroom. I know your secret, those eyes said. And I'm not done with you yet. The ride home was quiet. Thomas held the reins, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the road. Clara sat beside him, hands folded in her lap, watching the horizon and waiting for the storm she knew was coming. The children had been sent ahead with Widow Hutchins. Thomas had insisted on driving Clara himself. They were a mile from the ranch when he finally spoke. Everyone knows now. Yes? The whole territory will be talking by sundown. Yes. Thomas pulled the horses to a stop. The wagon creaked into stillness. I should have hit him. You would have lost everything. Maybe losing everything would have been worth it. Thomas turned to face her. No one talks about my family like that. My family? Clara's heart clenched. I'm not your family, Thomas. I'm your employee. Your arrangement. The hell you are. He grabbed her arm, not roughly but firmly, enough to make her look at him. You stood up in that courtroom and called out his game when I was too angry to see it. You stopped me from destroying myself. His grip tightened. That's not what an employee does. That's not what an arrangement does. Then what is it? Thomas didn't answer with words. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was desperate and angry and full of everything neither of them had been able to say. Clara gasped against his mouth, and he pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her hair, the other pressed flat against her back. When they finally broke apart, both of them were shaking. That, Thomas said roughly, is what that is. Clara couldn't speak, couldn't think, could only stare at this man who'd rejected her, accepted her, defended her, and now kissed her like she was the only thing keeping him alive. Thomas, don't. He pressed his forehead against hers. Don't tell me we can't. Don't tell me it's too complicated. I've spent 3 weeks trying to convince myself I don't want you, and I'm done lying. I wasn't going to say any of that. Then what? Clara pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. I was going to say, it's about time. Thomas laughed a real laugh, surprised and warm, and nothing like the cold man who'd met her at the train station 4 weeks ago. You're something else, Clara Thornton. So I've been told. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise instead of a confession. They were still a mile from home, still had a ranch to save and children to raise and an enemy to face. But for this one moment, none of it mattered. The peace lasted exactly 12 hours. Clara woke to screaming. Not Sarah's night terrors, something worse. Something outside. She ran to the window and saw flames. The barn was burning. Thomas. He was already out of bed, pulling on boots, grabbing his rifle. Stay with the children. The horses. Stay with the children. He was gone, disappearing into the orange nightmare that had been his barn. Clara heard the horses screaming a sound she would never forget and forced herself away from the window. What's happening? Grace appeared in the doorway, face white with terror. Fire. In the barn. Your father's handling it. The horses? I know. Get your siblings. Bring them to the kitchen. Don't let them look outside. Clara dressed in seconds and ran downstairs. Through the kitchen window, she could see Thomas and the ranch hands battling the blaze, but it was too big, too fast. Someone had set it deliberately. Garrett. It had to be Garrett. She was about to run outside when she heard something that stopped her cold. A child's voice. Outside. Screaming for help. Clara threw open the back door and saw Ruth standing at the edge of the property, still in her nightgown, pointing at something Clara couldn't see. Ruth? What are you doing out here? Sarah! Ruth screamed. Sarah went to save the kittens. She's in the barn. Clara's blood turned to ice. She ran. The heat hit Clara like a wall. She didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Sarah was 3 years old, and somewhere inside that burning barn, and nothing else mattered. Clara, no! Thomas's voice cut through the roar of flames, but she was already through the door. Smoke filled her lungs instantly. She dropped to her knees, crawling beneath the worst of it, screaming Sarah's name. Sarah, Sarah, where are you? A small cough, to her left, near the back stalls. Clara crawled faster, eyes streaming, throat raw. The heat pressed down on her like a living thing. Somewhere above, timbers groaned and cracked. Sarah, Mama, Clara. The tiny voice came from behind a pile of hay bales. Clara found her there, curled into a ball, clutching a mewling kitten against her chest. Her face was streaked with soot and tears. I couldn't leave them, Sarah sobbed. The kitties were crying. I know, baby, I know. Clara grabbed her kitten and all and pulled her close. We have to go. Now. Can you hold on to me? Sarah wrapped her arms around Clara's neck. The kitten squirmed between them. Clara stood, keeping low, and ran. The front door was gone, consumed by flames. She veered right toward the side entrance, but a beam crashed down in front of her. Sparks exploded. Sarah screamed, It's okay, it's okay. We'll find another way. But there was no other way. The fire had surrounded them. Clara backed against the stone wall of the old feed room, the only section not yet burning. She pressed Sarah against her chest and covered the child's head with her body. This is how we die, she thought. After everything. This is how it ends. Then she heard it. A sound like thunder, but wrong. Too rhythmic. Too purposeful. The wall behind her shattered. Thomas came through the gap like a force of nature axe in his hands, face twisted with terror and determination. He'd broken through the stone wall itself. "Give her to me." Clara handed Sarah through the opening. Thomas passed her to someone outside Widow Hutchins. Clara realized dimly and reached back in. "Your hand? Clara, give me your hand." She reached. Their fingers touched. The roof collapsed. Clara felt herself falling. Felt the impact. Felt Thomas's arms wrap around her and drag her through the gap as the world turned to fire and darkness. Then nothing. She woke to pain. Everything hurt. Her lungs burned with each breath. Her arms were wrapped in bandages. Her hair smelled like smoke, and something else, something medicinal. "Don't try to move." Thomas's voice, close, exhausted. Clara opened her eyes. She was in her bed in the guest room that had become hers. Weak daylight filtered through the curtains. Sarah. Safe. Few burns on her hands. Doc says she'll heal clean. Thomas leaned forward in the chair beside her bed. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You saved her life." "Is the barn?" "Gone. Lost 6 horses." His jaw tightened. "But my daughter is alive, because you ran into a burning building when I told you to stay inside." Clara tried to read his expression. Anger, gratitude, both. "I couldn't let her die. You almost died instead. Would you have done different?" Thomas was silent. His hand found hers on the blanket, careful of the bandages. "No," he admitted. "I wouldn't have." They sat in silence. Clara felt consciousness slipping the laudanum, pulling her back under. "The children," she whispered. "Worried sick. Ruth's been praying for you every hour. Grace won't leave your door." Thomas's voice cracked. "Henry told me if you died, he'd never forgive me for not saving you faster." Clara's eyes burned with tears she was too weak to shed. "Tell them I'm not dying. Tell them I'm too stubborn." Thomas almost smiled. "I'll tell them." She slept. 3 days later, Clara was well enough to sit up. A week after that, she could walk to the kitchen. The burns on her arms were healing, though Doc Morrison warned they'd scar. "Battle wounds," Thomas said, when she showed him tracing the damaged skin with gentle fingers. "Proof you're a fighter." "I don't feel like a fighter. I feel like someone who makes terrible decisions." Running into a burning barn to save a child isn't a terrible decision. It's not a smart one either. Thomas cupped her face in his hands. "Smart people don't survive Wyoming. Brave people do." He kissed her forehead, soft and tender. Clara leaned into the touch. "The sheriff came by yesterday," Thomas said, stepping back, "while you were sleeping." Clara's stomach tightened. "And they found kerosene rags near the back of the barn. The fire was set deliberately." "Garrett. Can't prove it. He was at the saloon in town all night. 20 witnesses. He hired someone. Can't prove that either." Thomas's hands curled into fists. "He's too smart. Always has been." Clara thought about the smooth-voiced man who'd exposed her shame in the courtroom, the calculating eyes, the patient hatred. "He won't stop," she said. "Not until he's destroyed you." "I know. What do we do?" Thomas met her eyes. "We get married." Clara blinked. "What? The Reverend's coming through next week. I want him to marry us." Thomas took her hands. "Properly. Legally. In front of the whole territory." "Thomas, Everyone knows about my past now. They'll think you're... I don't care what they think." His grip tightened. "Let them talk. Let them whisper. You're the mother of my children, Clara. You ran into fire for my daughter. You stayed when every other woman would have run." His voice roughened. "I want you to be my wife, not my arrangement, not my employee. My wife." Clara's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her healing burns. "What about children you wanted?" "I have 5 children. 5 healthy, stubborn, wonderful children who already call you Mama." Thomas brought her hands to his lips. "That's enough. You're enough." Clara felt something break loose inside her. The last wall she'd built, the last defense she'd held. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Thomas pulled her into his arms, careful of her injuries, and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Thank God," he breathed against her hair. "Thank God." The children found out at supper. "You're getting married, really, truly married." Ruth bounced in her chair so hard she nearly fell off. "Really, truly," Clara confirmed. "Can I wear my blue dress, the one with the ribbons? You can wear whatever you want. Can I hold the flowers? If you'd like. Can I?" "Ruth." Grace's voice cut through. "Let her breathe." Clara looked at Grace, uncertain what to expect. The older girl had been quiet since the fire, watching Clara with an expression she couldn't read. "Grace, are you all right with this?" Grace set down her fork. Every eye at the table turned to her. "When you went into the barn," Grace said slowly, "I thought you were going to die. I thought we were going to lose another mother." "Grace, let me finish." Grace's chin lifted. "I was angry. I was scared. I thought it was happening again, just like with Mama." Her voice cracked. "But then Papa pulled you out, and you were alive, and Sarah was alive, and I realized something." Clara waited, heart in her throat. "Mama died having babies. She died because she wanted to give Papa something he thought he needed." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "But you almost died saving a baby that's already here. You didn't run into that fire to give Papa sons. You ran in because you love us, because we're already your family." Clara couldn't speak, couldn't move. Grace stood, walked around the table, and put her arms around Clara's neck. "I want you to marry Papa," Grace whispered. "I want you to be our real mother, not because we need someone to cook and clean, because we need you." Clara held her tight, tears streaming down her face. "I need you too," she managed. "All of you. So much." Henry appeared at her other side, then Ruth, then Samuel and Sarah, all of them pressing close, a tangle of arms and tears and joy. Thomas watched from his chair, eyes bright, saying nothing. He didn't need to. The wedding was set for the following Saturday. Clara spent the week in a blur of preparation. Widow Hutchins brought fabric for a dress. Mrs. Henderson sent wildflowers preserved in salt. Even families who'd whispered about Clara's shame showed up with gifts and well wishes. "Wyoming folk take care of their own," Widow Hutchins explained. "You ran into fire for a child. That matters more than what happened when you were 19. Clara wanted to believe it, wanted to trust that the past could stay buried. But she knew Garrett was still out there, still planning, still waiting. The morning before the wedding, a rider came. Clara was helping Grace press ribbons when she heard hoofbeats, fast, urgent. Thomas went to the door. Clara watched through the window as a young man in a deputy's uniform handed him a folded paper. Thomas read it. His face went gray. "What is it?" Clara crossed to him, heart pounding. "Thomas, what's wrong?" He handed her the paper without speaking. It was a legal summons. From the territorial court in Cheyenne. Silas Garrett was bringing charges. Not against Thomas, against Clara. "Fraud," she read aloud, voice shaking. "Fraud and moral corruption. He's claiming I entered into a marriage contract under false pretenses. that I deliberately deceived a territorial citizen for financial gain. It's nonsense, Thomas said. We weren't married when you arrived. There was no contract. There were letters. Your advertisement promised. I know what my advertisement said. Thomas grabbed her shoulders. This won't stand. No judge in the territory would convict you on this. The hearing is in Cheyenne. The judge there is Garrett's cousin. Thomas's face hardened. I know. That's why he filed there instead of here. Clara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Everything she'd built, everything she'd hoped for, crumbling again. If I'm convicted, what happens? Thomas didn't answer. Thomas, what happens? Prison, he said finally. Or deportation back east, depending on the judge's mood. And the wedding. Can't marry a woman facing criminal charges. Not legally. Clara sat down heavily. The summons crumpled in her fist. He planned this. He waited until we announced the wedding, and then... I know what he did. Thomas knelt in front of her. Clara, look at me. She forced her eyes to meet his. We're going to fight this, together. I'll hire the best lawyer in the territory. I'll sell horses, mortgage the ranch if I have to, but I'm not letting him take you from us. Thomas, you can't risk everything for what? For the woman I love. His voice cracked on the word. I already told you. You're enough. You're more than enough. And I'll burn down every courthouse in Wyoming before I let Silas Garrett put you in prison. Clara stared at him. You love me. Thomas blinked. Yes. I thought that was obvious. You never said it. I'm saying it now. He took her face in his hands. I love you, Clara Thornton. I love your stubbornness and your courage and the way you make my children smile. I love that you ran into fire without thinking and that you stood up to Garrett without flinching. His thumbs brushed her tears away. I love you, and I'm not letting you go. Clara kissed him, hard and desperate and full of everything she couldn't put into words. I love you too, she whispered against his mouth. I love you too. The hearing was scheduled for Monday. The wedding was supposed to be Saturday. We could still do it, Widow Hutchins suggested. Marry before the hearing, make it harder for Garrett to claim fraud. Or make it easier, Thomas countered. If we rush the wedding, it looks like we have something to hide. We have nothing to hide. We know that, but judges don't always care about truth. The decision was made for them on Friday morning. Another rider. Another message. This one wasn't from the court. Clara unfolded the paper with trembling hands. The handwriting was unfamiliar, cramped and hurried like someone writing in secret. Miss Thornton Garrett has paid 3 men to testify against you in Cheyenne. They'll swear you solicited them for immoral purposes when you first arrived in town. It's all lies, but the judge won't care. He's been bought. There's only one way to stop this. Garrett keeps records of his bribes in a safe at his ranch house. 3rd bedroom behind the portrait of his father. Get those records and you can prove he's been corrupting the court. I can't sign my name. I work for Garrett and I want out, but not at the cost of my life. This is all I can do. Be careful. He's more dangerous than you know. Clara read the letter twice, 3 times. It could be a trap, Thomas said when she showed him. Garrett could have written it himself, lure us onto his property, then have us arrested for trespassing. Or it could be real. Someone who wants to help. Why would anyone risk their life to help us? Why did I run into a burning barn? Clara met his eyes. Sometimes people do brave things, even when it's stupid. Thomas stared at her for a long moment. You want to break into Silas Garrett's house. I want to save my family. Clara. If those records exist, they could end this. Not just the charges against me. Everything. His water rights claims. His attacks on other ranchers. All of it. Clara grabbed his hands. Thomas, This could be our only chance." Thomas was silent. His jaw worked. His eyes held fear and fury, and something else, something that looked almost like pride. "If we get caught, then we get caught together." Clara squeezed his hands. "I'm done running. I'm done being afraid. Garrett wants to destroy us. Let him try. But I'm not going to sit here and wait for it." Thomas pulled her close. His heart pounded against her ear. "You're the bravest woman I've ever known," he murmured. "And the most reckless." "Is that a yes?" "That's a God help us both." He pulled back and looked at her with fierce determination. "We go tonight, while Garrett's at his weekly poker game in town." "How do you know about his poker game?" "I know a lot of things about Silas Garrett." Thomas's smile was cold. "Time he learned I've been paying attention." They waited until the children were asleep. Grace was old enough to suspect something was wrong. She caught Clara at the door, bundled in her darkest clothes. "Where are you going?" Clara hesitated. Grace deserved truth. She'd earned it. "To do something dangerous. To protect our family." Grace's eyes widened. "Is it about Garrett?" "Yes." "Papa's going with you?" "Yes." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she stepped forward and hugged Clara fiercely. "Come back," she whispered. "Promise you'll come back." "I promise." Clara kissed her forehead and slipped out into the night. Thomas was waiting with 2 horses. They rode in silence, following trails he knew by heart, staying off the main roads where Garrett's men might spot them. The Garrett ranch appeared after an hour of riding. It was twice the size of the Callahan place, grand and imposing, built with money that had blood on every dollar. "House looks dark," Thomas murmured. "But there'll be guards." "How many?" "At least 2, maybe 3. "Can we get past them?" Thomas's jaw tightened. "We're about to find out." They tied the horses in a grove of cottonwoods and approached on foot. Clara's heart hammered so loud she was sure the whole territory could hear it. The first guard was asleep. Drunk, probably. Thomas slipped past him like a shadow. The second guard was more alert. He stood at the back entrance, rifle in hand, scanning the darkness. "I'll distract him," Clara whispered. "You go in through the side." "Clara, trust me." She didn't give him time to argue. She stepped out of the shadows and walked straight toward the guard, trying to look lost and frightened. "Help! Please help me!" The guard raised his rifle. "Who's there?" "My horse threw me. I've been walking for hours. Please, I need water." The guard hesitated. Clara saw the moment his suspicion warred with his humanity. "Stay where you are, ma'am. I'll get you some—" Thomas hit him from behind. The guard crumpled. "That was reckless," Thomas hissed. "It worked." They slipped inside. The house was dark and silent. Clara counted doors, remembering the letter. 3rd bedroom, behind the portrait. They found it in minutes. Thomas lifted the painting while Clara searched the safe behind it. "It's locked." "Can you open it?" Clara studied the mechanism. Simple combination lock. 3 numbers. "Give me time." She pressed her ear to the safe and turned the dial. Click, click, click. The safe swung open. Inside were stacks of papers, letters, receipts, records of every bribe, every threat, every dirty deal Silas Garrett had ever made. "My God," Clara breathed. "It's all here. Take everything. We'll sort it later." They stuffed the papers into Clara's saddlebags. Thomas closed the safe and replaced the portrait. They were almost at the back door when they heard it. Footsteps, coming fast. "Someone's coming." Thomas grabbed Clara's arm. "Move." They ran. Out the door, across the yard, toward the horses. A shot rang out. Dirt exploded at Clara's feet. "Stop thieves!" More shots, more shouting. Clara's lungs burned as she ran harder than she'd ever run before. They reached the horses. Thomas boosted her into the saddle and swung up onto his own mount. "Ride!" he shouted. "Don't look back." Clara rode. Behind them, the Garrett ranch erupted into chaos. Lights blazed, men shouted, Hoofbeats thundered. But Clara and Thomas had a head start. And they had something more important. They had the truth. They rode through the night without stopping. Clara's fingers cramped around the reins, her body ached from the hard pace, but she didn't slow down. The saddlebags pressed against her leg, heavy with evidence that could save everything or destroy them both. "They're not following," Thomas called over the thunder of hooves. "Yet. We need to get to the sheriff before dawn, before Garrett can spin his story." They pushed the horses harder. The town of Bitter Creek was still sleeping when they arrived. Thomas pounded on the sheriff's door until a lamp flickered to life inside. Sheriff Marcus Boone appeared, suspenders hanging, face creased with sleep and annoyance. "Callahan, what in God's name?" "We have evidence." Thomas shoved past him into the office. "Against Silas Garrett. Bribery, arson, fraud, everything." Boone's eyes widened as Clara emptied the saddlebags onto his desk. Papers cascaded across the worn wood letters, receipts, bank records, names and dates and amounts that told a story of corruption spanning years. "Where did you get these? Does it matter?" "It matters if you stole them, Callahan." Clara stepped forward. "Sheriff, these documents prove that Garrett paid men to burn our barn. They prove he bribed the judge in Cheyenne to file false charges against me. They prove he's been systematically destroying ranchers across this territory for his own gain." Boone picked up a letter, scanning it quickly. His face went pale. This is Judge Whitmore's cousin, taking money to rule in Garrett's favor." "There's more. Keep reading." The sheriff sat down heavily and began sorting through the pile. With each document, his expression darkened. "He paid the Henderson fire starter," Boone muttered, "and the witnesses against you, Miss Thornton, $300 each to lie under oath." "Can you arrest him?" Boone looked up. "With this, I can hang him." Clara's knees went weak with relief. Thomas caught her arm, steadying her. "What happens now?" Thomas asked. "Now I send a rider to the territorial marshal. This is bigger than local law." Boone gathered the papers carefully. "Garrett won't see tomorrow as a free man." "And the charges against Clara?" "Dismissed. Can't prosecute someone based on bought testimony." The sheriff met Clara's eyes. "I'm sorry for what you've been through, ma'am. This should never have happened." Clara nodded, too exhausted for words. They were halfway home when the riders intercepted them. 6 men on horseback blocking the road. Garrett sat at the center, his face twisted with rage, all pretense of civility gone. "You think you've won, Callahan?" Thomas pulled his horse up short, positioning himself between Clara and the armed men. "It's over, Garrett. The sheriff has everything." "Everything!" Garrett laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You broke into my home. You stole my property. By the time I'm done, you'll both be in prison, and your precious children will be wards of the territory. Those documents prove you're a murderer and a thief." "Documents can be disputed. Witnesses can be persuaded." Garrett's smile turned cruel. "I've been playing this game longer than you've been alive, Callahan. You think one raid ends it?" Clara felt fear coil in her stomach. He was right. Even with evidence, men like Garrett found ways to escape justice. Money bought lawyers. Lawyers bought time. Time bought opportunities. "What do you want?" she asked, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Garrett's eyes shifted to her. "Ah, the Barren bride speaks. What do I want?" He leaned forward in his saddle. "I want your husband to sign over his water rights. Tonight. In exchange, I let you both ride away. Take your brats. Start over somewhere else. Nobody has to die. And if we refuse? Then my men shoot you both, and I tell the sheriff you attacked us on the road. Self-defense." Garrett shrugged. "Your children become orphans. The ranch becomes mine anyway. Either way, I win." Thomas's hand moved toward his rifle. "Don't." Garrett's voice hardened. 6 against 2, Callahan. Even you're not that stupid." Clara's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned. Thomas was a good shot, but not good enough to take 6 men before one of them killed her. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Coming from behind Garrett's men. A lot of hoofbeats. Garrett heard them too. His head snapped around. Out of the darkness came riders. Dozens of them. Ranchers from across the valley, the Hendersons, the Wilsons, the O'Briens. Men who'd lost cattle to Garrett's schemes. Men who'd been threatened, bullied, burned out. And at their head, Sheriff Boone, with a badge gleaming in the first light of dawn. Silas Garrett, you're under arrest for arson, bribery, conspiracy to commit murder, and about a dozen other charges I haven't finished reading yet. Garrett's face went white. His men shifted nervously, suddenly aware they were surrounded. This is outrageous. I'll have your badge, Boone. You're welcome to try, from a jail cell. The sheriff nodded to his deputies. Take him. Garrett's hand moved toward his gun. Thomas was faster. The rifle shot cracked through the morning air. Garrett's pistol flew from his grip unfired. He clutched his bleeding hand, screaming curses. That was for my barn, Thomas said calmly. Next one's for my daughter. The deputies swarmed forward. Garrett's men surrendered without a fight, hired guns with no loyalty beyond their last paycheck. Clara watched as they dragged Garrett from his horse, shackled his wrists, and threw him over a saddle like a sack of grain. It was over. It was finally over. The wedding happened 3 days later. Not the grand affair they'd originally planned. Something smaller, simpler, more real. The whole valley came anyway. Clara stood in the farmhouse kitchen, Grace carefully adjusting her veil, a simple piece of lace Widow Hutchins had worn at her own wedding 40 years before. You look beautiful, Grace whispered. I'm terrified. I know. Grace smiled, a real smile, open and warm. But you're brave. Remember. Clara laughed through her tears. Who told you that? Papa. He says it all the time now. Grace smoothed the veil one last time. He says you're the bravest person he's ever known. Braver than him, even. Your father's wrong. My father's never wrong. Grace took her hand. Are you ready? Clara looked at herself in the small mirror. The burns on her arms were still healing, visible above her gloves. Her face was thinner than it had been a month ago. Her eyes held shadows that hadn't been there before. But she was alive. Her family was safe. And the man she loved was waiting outside. Yes, she said. I'm ready. The ceremony was held under the cottonwood tree where Thomas's parents had married 50 years before, the same tree where Mary had said her vows, where generations of Callahans had pledged their lives to each other. Clara walked through the gathered crowd, Ruth scattering wildflower petals before her, the twins clutching her skirt on either side. Henry stood straight and proud beside his father. Grace waited at the front, holding Clara's small bouquet like a sacred trust. Thomas watched her approach. His eyes were bright. His jaw trembled slightly. When she reached him, he took her hands and held them like he'd never let go. You came, he whispered. Of course I came. I wasn't sure, after everything. Thomas? Clara squeezed his hands. I ran into a burning barn for your daughter. I broke into a criminal's house for your family. You really thought a little thing like a wedding would scare me off? He laughed, that rare surprised laugh she'd come to love. No, he admitted. I suppose not. The Reverend cleared his throat. Shall we begin? The vows were simple, traditional. But when Thomas spoke them, they sounded like poetry. I, Thomas Jacob Callahan, take thee, Clara Helen Thornton, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. Clara's voice shook when it was her turn, but she got through it. Every word a promise, every syllable a truth. I now pronounce you man and wife. The Reverend smiled. You may kiss your bride. Thomas kissed her softly, tenderly, as if she might break. Clara kissed him back harder, pulling him close, not caring that the whole valley was watching. When they finally broke apart, Ruth's voice rang out clear and bright. "Does this mean you're really our mama now, forever and ever?" Clara knelt down, gathering Ruth into her arms. "Forever and ever." "Promise?" "I promise." Samuel and Sarah piled on then, Henry, then even Grace, all of them wrapped around Clara in a tangle of arms and love and joy. Thomas stood back watching his family with something like wonder on his face. "What are you waiting for?" Clara called to him. "You're part of this too." He joined them, his strong arms circling them all, holding them together like he could protect them from the whole world. Maybe he couldn't, but Clara knew with bone-deep certainty that he would die trying. And so would she. The celebration lasted all day. Food appeared from everywhere, pies and roasts and fresh bread contributions from neighbors who'd once whispered about Clara's shame. Now they embraced her, welcomed her, called her one of their own. Wyoming folk take care of their own, Widow Hutchins repeated, watching Clara accept congratulations from the Henderson family. "You proved yourself, girl. More than proved yourself." "I almost got us all killed." "But you didn't." The widow patted her arm. "That's what matters." As the sun began to set, Clara found a quiet moment on the porch. The sounds of music and laughter drifted from inside, but out here, the world was still. Thomas found her there. "Hiding from your own wedding party." "Just breathing." Clara leaned against him when he sat beside her. "It's been a lot." "It has." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one. "I got a telegram from the marshal," Thomas said finally. "Garrett's being transferred to Cheyenne for trial. The judge there, the honest one, says he's likely to hang for the arson deaths. The Henderson horses, and 2 ranch hands who died in a fire last year. Turns out that wasn't an accident either." Clara closed her eyes. Justice. Real justice. She'd almost stopped believing it was possible. "How do you feel?" Thomas asked. "Relieved, exhausted, happy." She opened her eyes. "Scared." "Of what?" "That I'll wake up and this will all be a dream. That I'll be back on that train clutching my Bible with the doctor's letter inside, hoping for a chance I don't deserve." Thomas turned her to face him. "You deserve everything. Every good thing. I spent weeks trying to convince myself you didn't, and I was wrong. I was so wrong, Clara." "We were both wrong. Both afraid." "Not anymore." Clara thought about it. The truth was, she was still afraid. Afraid of losing this family she'd found. Afraid of being enough. Afraid of the scars inside and out that would never fully heal. But fear wasn't the same as running. "I'll always be afraid," she admitted, "but I'm done letting fear make my choices." Thomas kissed her forehead. "That's my brave girl." "Your wife," she corrected. His smile could have lit the whole territory. "My wife." The door burst open behind them. "Mama, Clara, Papa." Ruth tumbled onto the porch, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Grace says it's time to cut the cake, but Henry says we have to wait for you and the twins are trying to stick their fingers in the frosting and everything's a mess." Clara laughed. "Then we'd better go save the cake." She stood and reached for Thomas's hand. He took it, lacing their fingers together. "Ready?" he asked. Clara looked back at the house. The house where she'd arrived a stranger, where she'd become a mother, where she'd nearly died and fought to live. The house where 5 children waited for her, where her future waited for her. "Ready," she said. They walked inside together. 6 months later, the letter arrived. Clara found it in the post when she rode into town for supplies. A thick envelope, expensive paper, Philadelphia postmark. Her heart stopped. She opened it with trembling fingers and read, "Dear Miss Thornton, or should I say Mrs. Callahan, I am writing with news I hope will bring you peace. My name is Elizabeth Warren. 10 years ago, you were a student teacher at my school. You were dismissed under circumstances that were neither fair nor fully investigated. I have recently learned the truth of what happened to you. The man responsible, the medical student who abandoned you, died last year. Before his death, he confessed his sins to his minister, including what he did to you. I am writing to offer you something long overdue, a formal apology and a complete restoration of your teaching credentials. The board has agreed to expunge your records. As far as Philadelphia is concerned, you left in good standing. I know this cannot undo the past, but I hope it can help you move forward. With deepest respect and admiration, Elizabeth Warren, Headmistress, Warren Academy for Young Ladies. Clara read the letter 3 times before she could breathe. Restored. After all these years, after all the shame and secrets and running, she was restored. Thomas found her sitting on the wagon seat, tears streaming down her face, letter clutched in her hands. "Clara, what's wrong? What happened?" She handed him the letter without speaking. He read it again, then looked at her with wonder. "They apologized. They gave me back my name. You already had your name." Thomas climbed up beside her and pulled her close. "You're Clara Callahan, mother of 5, survivor of fire, defeater of villains. The name you had before doesn't matter." "I know." Clara wiped her eyes. "But this means the past is finally finished. It can't hurt me anymore." "It never could." Thomas kissed her temple. "You were always more than what happened to you." Clara leaned into his strength, letting the last weight she hadn't known she was carrying finally fall away. She was free. Not free from memory that would never happen. Not free from scars, those would always remain. But free from shame. Free from secrets. Free from the girl who'd hidden a doctor's letter in her Bible and hoped no one would ever find out. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman, a wife, a mother, a Callahan. Spring came early that year. Clara stood on the porch watching her children play in the muddy yard. Ruth chased the chickens while the twins splashed in puddles. Henry sat on the fence reading aloud to Grace, who pretended not to listen while secretly hanging on every word. Thomas appeared beside her, coffee in hand, shoulder brushing hers. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Clara smiled. "I'm thinking about that day at the train station. How scared I was. How certain I was that everything would fall apart. And now I'm thinking about how wrong I was." She turned to face him fully. "I thought I was coming here to escape my past, to hide from what I couldn't give. But that's not what happened at all." "What did happen?" Clara looked at her children. The children who'd chosen her, who'd loved her, who'd made her their mother, not through blood, but through something stronger. "I found out what I could give," she said. "Everything. Everything I had. Everything I am." She met Thomas's eyes. And it turned out to be enough. Thomas set down his coffee and pulled her into his arms. "It was always enough," he said. "You were always enough. I was just too blind to see it." "We both were." Ruth's voice carried across the yard. "Mama, Papa, come see, the chickens are dancing." Clara laughed. "Chickens don't dance, Ruth." "These ones do. Come look." Thomas grinned at Clara. "Shall we go see the dancing chickens?" "I suppose we must." They walked into the yard together, hand in hand, surrounded by mud and children and chaos and joy. The world had measured Clara's worth by what she couldn't give. A doctor had written it on paper. A society had stamped it on her soul. A man had abandoned her because of it. But 5 children had looked past all of that. They'd seen something the world couldn't measure, something that couldn't be counted or weighed or reduced to a single devastating word. They'd seen a mother, and they'd chosen her anyway.